All good. This is a new feature on Zoom that seems to be happening of like recording in process. And I have that on record now, and I don't edit my podcast. So that is my secret to success, guys. This episode, we have the beautiful Laura Hamilton, who we're going live on Instagram here as well as Zoom. So I feel like I'm talking to myself as an audience here. So you might see me flicking between the both if you're watching, but if you're just listening to the podcast, that won't matter at all. So I'm going to give the beautiful Laura an introduction here, and just tell you a little bit about how I came across her and what her story is before I let this beautiful soul tell her own story. And we're chatting just before here, and she's like, I'm not someone who kind of hides the truth. I let it all come out. So I am super stoked for where this conversation is going to go. But just for a little bit of a preface as to who she is, where she's from, what she's doing. She's a Canadian farm girl with a passion for people and potential, and always stretching herself and challenging those around her to grow. So already I know that I love Laura, because when I hear farm, I'm like, oh, I wish I grew up on that farm. Like, you know, it's like that Kermit meme of the farm I never grew up on. And when I was reading her bio, this is another, you know, thing that I think a lot of people might connect to. We grow up with this sense of like a really disempowered self-image, and we tell ourselves all of these stories, this negative talk, and it might have been impacted by the environment or the people that were around us. And this really stopped her from saying yes to a lot of opportunities, of being the best person that she could be while growing up, which we all know shapes who we are when we get older. But you know, the warrior within prevailed and saw her change high schools as like partway through grade 10, which I did too, when she refused to be in a school where she didn't feel supported or free. And then the turning point opened the door for a life beyond the farm, graduating from uni with an English degree at 22, getting certified as a coach, teacher, speaker with the John Maxwell Team at 23. And moved her life to England for a relationship that began at her certification event when she began dating one of the instructors in the program. So this is going to be this is going to be the segue as to where I want to bring Laura in to tell that herself as well, because already I love this girl. Like, she's been a coach for like 10 years. She's packed up her life. She's the kind of fiery spirit that is not willing to just take no for an answer. And she's also, with knowing very little about her, taken responsibility for this, not only in the work that she does, but in the person and the partner that she is, the sister that she is, the daughter that she is. I don't even know if you have siblings, but just the general sister vibes of universe. So I'm going to welcome you in here, Laura. If you are in Insta as well, just say request to join and I will add you in there as well. Okay. And you can go ahead by telling your incredible story of why you do the work that you do.
Okay. I'm here. I don't know how.
Yeah, that's all good. It's probably just a little bit delayed. I can see that you've joined, and then there should be just like a little request to join, and then I'll add you in. And when you're up and running, we'll get you to tell the why that has led you into this incredible life that you live now and this incredible journey that you've been on.
It's not giving me the option, but I'll keep my eye on it.
Okay, I'll see if I can add you myself.
But in terms of the journey that I've been on to here, it's been pretty epic. And writing a book about the transformation of self-image through the hero's journey from a soulful perspective over the last 4 years has been a deep dive into who and whose I truly am, that we are all in this to really evolve to our next level without that being a religious reference in any way. I'm very out of the box and alternative, and really just about helping people find who they are by sharing my own story, which I didn't understand was so different from the majority who want to show up arrived. And right before we went live, we were talking about that whole fake it till you make it saying being a pet peeve of mine since I can even remember first hearing it, because it just never made sense to me. And it felt so inauthentic to pretend to be something that you're not for the sake of making it. And it's just like, I can show up in those moments when it's, I'm not ready, but I'll show up anyway, and then let the situation and scene organically unfold, which has always just been the way that I am, which is why I've always been a great coach, even though through those 10 years, I haven't really prioritized the business piece of things, because I've always prioritized people over profits. And in this world, that really doesn't fly so well. And so it's really been a challenge to really get to this place, though I'm grateful it did take me as long as what it did, because in the end, it really stretched me to my breaking point a few times where I almost didn't make it, didn't want to make it, and experienced the lowest of lows to be able to know what it feels like to be there, to be able to help other people from being there as well, without necessarily having to get myself deep into the trenches emotionally that way, but to have learned how to use the tools that I was trying to share from a place of, I was trying to share the tools without having practiced them. And with the Peaceful Inner Warriors United movement that I've been working on, I have created a special practice for people to be able to use. And while I was going through everything that it's taken me to be able to get those tools to use, I knew that I hadn't created my own special practice fully, and I didn't have the practical application of the theory that I knew so well. And so it really took me on some deep dives, and it really taught me a lot, including that if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. When I got sent into a mental institution because I called the police to report the system was corrupt, and they were in on it, and I didn't know who else to call because I couldn't get to the embassy, because your whole country is supposed to be safe if you're in it. And the truth is that's not the truth. And I was so naive, and I was basically going through my own enlightenment experience, because I had stretched so much when I'd moved to England. And then in 2015, when I came back to the farm, and I was working, selling the program that I was certified in for a year and a half, and had access to really great commission. And yet I was living a pre-COVID lifestyle that was not healthy, and that was completely disconnected. And my social sphere was online, and ultimately it gave me great insight into what people are going through and have been over the last 14 months while the world's been in lockdown. And so I'm grateful for all of that, but it also very much was that my identity became vested in my online image, not because it was all about the selfies and, look at me being in this cool place pretending to be awesome, but like actually look at where I am, because I am in an awesome space, even though I'm not necessarily making money. But like, I did 15 trips to America, including 3 sacred sojourns of the soul out for 3 weeks, that really stretched and expanded me. And then I would come back, and it's like expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. But when coming back to the contracted state of the familial comfort zone, living in my grandparents' basement for the last 3.5 years, nobody got it. And especially working on a book that just doesn't seem to get finished, even though it's like I've restarted that baby so many times that I can't even tell you. And so that whole process of leaving and then coming back empty-handed, nobody else being able to understand how much I had expanded, and then to try to fit into the box, that was devastating on so many levels, especially because I made investments to take my next step, because I knew that you just have to keep saying yes, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense, if it feels in flow. But in doing so, you also have to say yes to the right opportunities for the right reasons. And so those were all really big lessons that I learned that kind of took me up till September 27th, 2019, when I made that fateful call. And then I got locked up for 2.5 weeks under the Mental Health Act because what I didn't understand was anything about common law or about contracts and the ability to rescind a contract within 3 days. And then from there, because the Form 1 is a 3-day voluntary hold that is not voluntary, but then they get you trapped and then send you into further. And I had no idea there was an indefinite leave option in the mental health system. So when I got stuck in there for 2 more weeks and then basically realized that I had to learn how to play their game in order to get out of there, I literally had went into it understanding about the imagery of a chessboard, or and that you could either be a pawn, a king, or a bishop, were the three characters I was kind of going into it playing with. And so the amount of crazy that I could tell from that experience and discovering that it really is the matrix where the system feeds itself and patients are turned into
Wow.
customers. And it was so mind blowing that it took my practical application of the theories that I'd invested so many years into coming to understand were good, but not great because they didn't have the application piece. And then I went through what I did and I did it publicly, Lauren. So I did
Wow.
Facebook lives while I was going in. And
Yeah.
I did lives when I met the guy that had found like Paul Bernardo's killer, or not Paul Bernardo's killer, but like he was dumping his final victim's
What?
body. And like he was in there and he'd had a house fire before he had got in there himself, and then couldn't prove that he was in there because like the stories that people tell can verge on seemingly insane or untrue because of how true they are. And I learned so much in that experience that we don't
Wow.
need to go into that specifically, but what I can say is that that in meeting him and one of the other patients, literally when I walked in there, I was at such a heightened state of awareness that when I got into the third place that they finally sent me to, which was a really nice place where I had my own room and I had my own bathroom en suite as well, which I feel was like buying me, or trying to,
Mm.
because that's what the, especially if you know your rights, then you get sent to places that are better to turn you into the patient that they need you to be. Because as I learned in Richard Glasser's book after I got out, in a book called Warning, Psychiatry Can Be Hazardous to Your Mental Health, what I learned is that the psychiatrist's first role and responsibility is to break the patient and to have them put their power into them so that we are no longer
Wow.
standing for ourselves. And so that was my eye-opening, ripped open experience of everything that I thought was good was not legit. Well, not to say it wasn't legit, but it wasn't what I thought. And then going through that and then basically getting myself out, not because I was released, but because I asked the right questions, because that was how I found
Mm.
out that I was eligible for release. And then I basically organized it. And then the psychiatrist tried to tell me not to go, and it was against his wishes. And he literally told me, Lauren, I personally guarantee you, you will fail to self regulate as I had planned to do. And when you do, go to the emergency room. And if you get too much sleep, you will get depressed. And if you get too little sleep, you'll have a psychotic episode again. And you need that. That was the best advice that he gave me, the only thing helpful. And ultimately, it was just such a shattering experience because I said, I haven't used drugs other than marijuana. I used to smoke a lot of weed, and I did 8 DMT ceremonies in the months before all of this too. So there was a lot of unintegrated energies that I hadn't
Yes.
brought in and learned how to process and had brought up a lot. And that's what happens, which I've since learned the teachings of the ascended masters say that's called storming the gates of heaven, which I was absolutely doing in order to get my breakthrough, because I knew that I had went in from so many contracted or so many expanded states and then was in a contracted space trying to be here for my grandparents, write my book, and change the world, but it's difficult to do when you don't have a community around you. And the online community, what I thought was full of people that were genuinely there for me and cared for me the way that I care for people. But what I found was very different. And then my family, who love me and tried to support me, they did their best, but they needed me to play smaller and be something different than I am, because I'm not meant to carry on in the way that my family have. And like, I have a brother that's a pharmacist, like just one, who's married to a pharmacist. And so, with the view that I have, that has meant, like, I've never met my youngest nephew, who will be a year next month, and I haven't seen the other for a year and a half. And there are so many sacrifices that have been made, because that experience opened my eyes to the truth in a way that
You
only
can't
can
unknow that.
from trauma. And then going through, then 2 weeks later, after I got out and got the meds out of my system that I had taken in order to be able to show some cooperation so that I could get myself out, the 4-day detox of those drugs from my system, I can't even tell you what that experience was like. And I'd only been on them for like a week and a half. So for people that have been on longer, I get it. I understand what that is like. But had I not been through that, there's no chance I would have fully understood. And then I checked myself into a hospital 2 weeks later for 5 days, and found out that truly the mental health system is not designed to help people. It's only designed to create patients. And, there are good people that work there, but ultimately you're set up to be supported, and only enough to be able to get the help that if you're in your mind, you're not in your heart. And you can't solve anything if you're not in the heart space. And they're not teaching that piece from my experience, which was really what I'm here to help bring to the world in a bigger way. And not me alone, but just needing the team of the right people, which is why I said yes to connecting with you.
Well,
And
there's a bigger meaning for this. We might actually chat after the recording a little bit more in detail moving forward with some stuff, but there is 100% a reason that we've connected. And that's really, really fascinating. It's actually kind of mind-boggling at how detailed your mission moving forward is, with something that I recorded in a very clear state a couple of months ago. And it was very clear. It was like, it didn't come from me. It was a calling, which is kind of all of the other stuff that I was talking about in my other podcasts with the lady before. So, like, everything that you have said has been very resonant. And if I'm to bring it back home to a very simplified message, something that you brought up was the hero's journey. And I feel like there's almost, I've looked up the hero's journey and the heroine's journey as well. And it almost feels like what you were describing is that you went through that, but there was almost that missing piece, because now you're giving back with gifts to share. But there was this piece of like, there's the breakaway, and there's the like separation, initiation side of things, but there was some sort of messy middle, almost like there was a retraction in the middle, like you went backwards, like further back from even when you began that hero's journey of like, I'm in like a worse position, I'm in like a worse mental state, to then get flung back now into the work that you do of like, now you're able to give back from that super educated, credible, holistic form. Because I think so many people can resonate with getting excitable about and passionate about something they want to teach, but not really having assimilated, not digesting, not understanding exactly what they're communicating. And it just blows me away that the fact that you could have ended up in a mental asylum like that is just like, I'm so speechless right now that like I have so many questions to ask you, but I'm like, I don't even know how to start like asking you about stuff. It's just,
I had to go meet some of the characters that are the players in the field.
right.
Like, we're all
yes
players on the game board of life. We're all lights.
Yep.
And we are if I hadn't been in that state, there was I can't even tell you how many characters, and literally it'll have to be the second or third book that I write, because the experiences leading up to that experience were out of this world, including being at the Hilton Embassy Suites, where I hosted a preliminary peace summit when I was there that didn't pan out the way that I had intended. But like 1 o'clock in the morning, I ended up inviting these 5 strange men into my room to facilitate a mediation that lasted like 3 hours with 2 of them. And like what transpired there was just out of this world. And like Damien is always my devil character in my life experiences. And like Damien came into the room with his Jack Daniels in hand, like looking for his boys to party because he thought it was one of their rooms because they were right next door. And I just, the story around it is just spectacular. But my point is that what I was tuned into when I was going through all of this was actually at a higher level that is not of this world. So it didn't make sense. So I did seem crazy, which by definition is different. But what I am not is insane, which is doing the same thing over again,
Uh-huh.
expecting different results. And the mental health system is based on the insane asylum of ones who cannot be kept in line by the tribe, then get pushed to the fringes or
Mm.
get pushed into the system to be eaten
Yes.
and to lose their cognition and their ability to connect and then get dulled down. And that's really what we're dealing with here. So I know that you've got lots of questions, but I'll say that it didn't end there.
Yeah.
And that was like November timeframe. I wound up in the institution, that time at the lowest point in my life, the other time being at the highest. And they've given me a label of bipolar because
Mm.
I am extreme. And ultimately we are all bipolar. We're in a universe of duality, of polarity. So
Polarity.
right, equal and opposites.
Yep.
So we have to really understand that being emotional, if you look at a child for instance, like a child will range through the spectrum of emotions in 40 seconds and nobody says they're a label.
Right.
But then when we get older, we're more powerful. And to keep the powerful in line, that's how they then have to diminish that power by saying that we're not good enough or that we're too much. And my entire life, I've been told, you're too much, Laura, you're too much. And it's just
Mm.
like, well, what if I'm actually just enough? And it just might be a little bit out of your comfort zone. But in
Right.
that whole experience, a lot kind of happened, and my grandma was going through a lot, and she did pass away last year. But January was a pretty trying time for where a situation I got put in that I'm not talking about publicly at this point.
Yeah.
But basically in February, I hit my lowest point. And I was teaching English to kids in China. And at the time I went over the edge, I call it. I was also teaching English to kids in China, which was right when Wuhan had went live with their 5G, which is why people were dropping with flies. And I think I was energetically tuned into what was going on without fully understanding it. And so there were factors connected to that experience where I also even understood that I was being an ambassador for peace, even though I didn't get paid for that.
Yeah.
I understood. And so there was that piece going on. But in February 2020, I basically lost faith in myself because I haven't prioritized making money, and I was smoking weed, and I had guidance when I first got certified that you can either coach or smoke, but you can't do both. Just for me,
Mm.
the ascended masters call weed the death drug because of how it keeps us from actually fulfilling our soul purpose, and it keeps us too dense, literally. And energetically to be able to make the ascension that we're all here to actually make, should we choose to become the ascended masters that each of us have the potential and capacity to be too. But that was all going on, and so I really judged myself hard because of how much I knew and how much I wasn't doing. And then I went through what I did and lost my reputation, lost a lot of friends because I called a lot of people, I messaged a lot of people and brought them into my crazy Because what I didn't understand was that I was activating people as well, energetically on a soul level. And it just was too much. And I even understood I was coming into the embodiment of the maiden mother crone archetype at the same time as not having it fully integrated, therefore not making it safe enough for people to be able to receive what I was saying in a way that their vagus nerve system or that they could actually receive it. So I wasn't making it safe enough for it to be trustworthy information, which made me a threat, especially to mothers who want to keep their baby safe. So I could see all of these archetypal patterns playing out and how I was playing out in it. And I wasn't doing a really good job, but I was in not doing a good job, because had I arrived and, had my awakening and been able to deliver it safely, it would have changed a lot before it was time. Which is kind of where I'm getting to now, in that last February, I gave up on myself. I'd even gotten a job as a mad scientist in schools teaching science experiments to kids.
Yes.
And I thought it was very befitting given what I'd just been through. So I thought it was like the irony was just brilliant. And so that was part of the humor in that, but it was stretching me as well. And like I was having judgments from, people that are saying like, Laura, you're 33 and you should be looking at a job that, you get a pension, which I don't believe will exist by the time we get there anyway. And it's just like, you need to have a stable job and reliable. And it's just like, I'm not the type that wants to be locked into a box of standard 9 to 5 forever. Like I wouldn't, that does not seem like living to me. And evil is live backwards. So it's like, please. So
that says Eminem says that love is evil, I'll spell it backwards. In one of his songs. Love is evil, I'll spell it backwards. But it's like one of my favorite Eminem songs.
I love that.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that.
I'll link it to you. Of course he would. He would say that. He's amazing.
Yeah. There's more I would say about that, but we're going to leave that one for an offline conversation.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah, basically when I gave up on myself, Lauren, I checked myself into a crisis stabilization bed program that I had found out about because of having been in with those services previously. And for 5 days I went there and just like felt so low and just wanted somebody else to give me the answer. Because what I realized throughout all of this was how accustomed I was to giving my power to people that were in positions I thought meant they knew how to wield my power more responsibly than I wasn't. And what I learned was that no one can do it for me. And so that was part of the journey of really empowering myself to be able to take a stand as strongly as what I am. And I will honestly say that part of my comeback was in getting to the point of being so humbled and surrendering to the place where it was just like, okay, I don't believe I can do anything. Literally, I didn't think I was capable of anything. Like even a job as a cashier, I didn't think I would be good enough. I was in that low of a space. And then I applied for a position and I got offered the job as a cashier, and I got the job offer in the interview. She loved my personality and thought I'd be great. And I had gotten a message earlier that morning that it was just like, just say yes when the opportunity comes up. And it's just like, so I said yes. And I started part-time on the front lines during a pandemic, right when the con video game drama kicked off in full gear. And I was there holding the light in a community where I understood what was going on, because like nobody washes the button at the far end of the tills and everybody touches that button. And I basically made jokes about it. And I told people about Rockefeller Report 2010 and Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. And I inquired about what was going on for them. And I refused to mask, which is why January 15th, I lost my job or was forced into an unpaid leave effective the next day because I wouldn't mask. And my doctor already has a belief system where was veiled before this. And so she told me in reply to my saying I wouldn't mask that it was inconvenient for her at first as well, but she got used to it and I would too. And it was like, no, I'm not giving away my ability to be my authentic self, because what we consent to, the next generation embrace.
And this whole thing, for some reason, 1984 just keeps coming up for me, the Orwellian era. And it's like the government is exactly, doing that to people now, and it's instilling fear. So it's like, I guess this can get controversial if people want to take it that way, but this is just a real chat. These are the thoughts that I love hearing from people, because I often defy things, not to be rebellious, but to stand in what feels authentic to me. And it's not moving out of what feels safe. It's like, actually, no, that doesn't make sense. Why is everybody following the crowd? And what you were talking about much earlier when you started with your story is this matrix. Yes, there's a matrix that is playing out that, we think, oh, no, we create our own life. It's like there's a part of us that are creating our own path and can break through our destiny or whatever it is. But then there's also a bigger part of the world that is already happening for us, and it's already happened, if that even makes sense. But what I guess the world at the moment is doing is creating the end button on the till, essentially, that they can press at any time, that people just go, like you did in the mental asylum. It's like, I'll just play your games, because it is a big game that we're playing. But it's like, which things are we actually playing the game for? Because that really does dictate the next generation. It dictates the next week. It dictates the next year. So yeah, I'm all for not following the crowd. I'm all for spreading light in areas that are particularly dark as well. And walking in the light of chaos and polarity isn't the easy path. And this is where, I have so much respect for you already. And that comes at a loss of some relationships, but it also comes as a huge gain of abundance for who you are as a person. And like, even if you're walking that with like 2 or 3 other people that are your team, and it's not family, it's like people that you've drawn in, it's like, that is a much more full life, in my opinion, because you can't keep yourself around the people that are going to perpetually condition you to be how they want you to be. It's like, well, that's not my life. I am going to be like this my whole life. I'm going to want to change jobs. I'm going to want to step out of my comfort zone, like perpetually. I'll get comfortable in a job. This is me. I get comfortable in a job and I'm like, well, better leave. Got to learn something new. And like, just hearing you talk about your experiences with work, I'm like, I completely get you, sister. Like, that makes sense to me. And it doesn't mean that you don't value yourself. It's like, well, no, this cashier job can give me as much experience with people and life as another friggin' high paying lawyer, corporate, whatever job you want to say. It's like, I don't see the hierarchy of jobs like that. I see that you can learn lessons in any job, situation, relationship that you're in. So I've just got so much respect for what you've gone through and what you'll continue to go through, just because of your personality. I love you. It's awesome.
Well, I think you're pretty amazing as well, and I'm grateful that you reached out. And the irony is that when I was little, when I used to be in this room, which is now my bedroom, it was my playroom at my grandparents' place. And I had a chalkboard on the wall that I used to line my little dolls up and teach them on, because I wanted to be a teacher. And then I had a little machine that I would ring groceries through, because I wanted to be a cashier and a teacher, because I saw how the cashier could either make or break someone's day when I was little, before it was devalued because of how little they get paid to do it. And so it was so ironic to me that I finally just said, I don't care how much I make, because I know I'm worth so much more than any dollar figure, regardless of what position I take. And when I fully just embraced that and would show up and smile ear to ear and bring people in and just treat them, some of the patients when I would be on traffic duty, where, because everybody has to stay safely separate from one another. It's like when I was on traffic, I'd be like traffic control, but I'd make it fun. And it was like Price is Right. Like, come on down.
Yes. Take the red carpet and I'll roll it across the road. Like, come on, let's strut your stuff for the next 10 meters.
I didn't have the ability to bring out a red carpet because that would bring all kinds of policy infringements. But, I did my best with what I had to work with. And that's the thing. Like, we really don't need more than our heart and our
Right.
personality in order to bring magic into someone's day, because every job that I've had, that's always been the thing. It was like, I just want to come and I want to sprinkle magic on everybody that I work with.
Yeah.
And even when I'm not working, I want to sprinkle magic on the people that pass through, and I give compliments freely just because it costs me nothing, and it might make their day and then be how they become the ripple effect that changes somebody else's day. And it's like, that's how we can change this world. It doesn't have to be paid for either.
It's the moments in between, and something that I heard from Tim Minchin like ages ago, and it was something that already was something I valued. It was like, treat the janitor like you'd treat the top person in an organization, and that goes for life. Like, treat the homeless person like you'd treat your sister or your brother or your mum or your dad. And it's like, when we treat all of those people in between, which is essentially this in between part of what we call life, in between birth and death, right? It's like, how do you actually treat yourself, and then how do you treat absolutely everyone and everything that you come into contact with? And it's like, if it's not kind and it's not honest and it's not open and it's not loving, it's like, maybe just take some time to reflect on that, of why you're not happy. Or if you're not happy, it's like, if we don't treat ourselves with those little kindness things amongst the day, amongst the moment, of course we're not going to be able to say that to somebody else. But I know that you've gone through so many processes yourself that I'm sure you have practices that are instilled in you, whether it's a sitting down meditation practice, or whether it's just existing in life as your practice. But I know, I can see that you must treat yourself so much more kindly and loving now, to be able to have done that along the way.
Yeah. And it was a process. And I feel like with what's going on collectively right now, there's a lot to be said about the matrix experience and the grid. And in the second place that I got sent to after the first place where I had went, when I'd called myself in, and I would recommend not doing that. If anybody's considering reporting the corruption, don't. Unless you know how to protect yourself.
This is like the most random podcast ever. Episode. I'm like, I don't know why. I was like, this is just such a random topic. For when people hear this, they'll be like, what? Like, who is this chick? I feel like they're just going to start looking up what you do. Like, she's a total legend, by the way. Oh.
Well, one day maybe, but truly, like, the things I do this because I feel like we need to bust the stigma around the whole mental health system. And so I feel like part of my experience was to be able to do that. Because if I hadn't been through what I did, there's no way that I would have the firsthand experience to be able to share the madness. And so the reason I go back to the experience was because truly it did completely shift so much in my world. And it was my experience that doesn't have to take anybody else down with it. So there's maybe that piece of comfort in that. Somebody may judge me and say, like, who is this chick? And like, she's off a rocker. And sure, maybe, but worry's like a rocking chair. It takes a lot of effort and gets you nowhere. So I'm not worried. And you can judge all you want. But the reality is that when I stayed overnight in the first place, it was a magical experience. And I met a man that was also in there, but dealing with the police. And it was his inner child that was connecting with these police or not connecting with these police. And he was resisting. And basically, they had already sussed out that I was no threat to anyone. I was just going through an enlightenment, which one doctor literally told me to give him my phone. And then he typed in Goff's work. And if you Stan Groff basically had created holotropic breath therapy, and it's about reaching natural states of enlightenment. And so that doctor told me to look that up on my phone and identified that was what I was going through. But because the mental health system is about trapping those who are going through that in order to tame them like an animal, but just as people in the modern day witch hunt, he said that, and I thought for sure that would have went into my record, and then that would be why I wasn't going to stay there for beyond my 3 voluntary days that weren't voluntary. But I was in there, and so I mediated conflict with Harvey, who was actually a Métis man or native man of some sort. And basically I could hear him fighting the police, and I knew it was his inner child was resisting the authority figures. And for whatever reason, I came out of my cell, which was literally what I was locked in, but they had the door open because they knew that I was no threat, and the bathroom was outside of the door by the nurse's station. So I left and I went over to him, and he was calling them an asshole. And I was like, yeah, they are assholes, but let's go this way. And it was like the mother in me met him where he was and kindly escorted him to his room. And it was so precious because he was actually in there because of a conflict, a domestic squabble. And he ended up, I sat with him and told him some stories, and he told me about Kickapoo joy juice, which is what the natives used to call the cider rum that they had been given by the white man. And it was so fascinating because of the fact that wherever we are born, are natives to that space. If we actually reclaim our power and our share of the land that we are due as natives of the land, if we are willing to be empowered to actually take advantage of that. Now, we can get back to that because that's really where I've come to in the last few months. And it's really significant for people to understand, because out of craziness, good things happen if we are willing to let the dust settle without it settling on us, because we kept moving and didn't let it stop us. But Harvey was an amazing gentleman. And then basically they moved me to the second place. And Lauren, you would know this, as they transported me by ambulance with being a paramedic. And they had me on the gurney, and they moved me with there, even though I said I can walk. And they said, oh, no, don't worry about it. They locked me down and brought me in. And it was interesting because a girl from high school actually was she actually drove the ambulance. Wow. And there were 2 other people, and we were having so much fun because like I was telling them like, Blair, do the radio, and then like they cut it off, and then we would talk, and then it's like, okay, no, turn it on again, turn it up, okay, no, turn it down. And then I'd say things, and it was like I was being a performer. I was in just a playful mood. Yeah. And I didn't understand why they get the patient to actually go in on the bed, because it shows lack of ability to move yourself. And so it's all part
mic drop. Oh.
Right? So I learned this because when they wheeled me into the second place, which was my namesake city, ironically enough, which is Hamilton, and 10th floor, which is my birthday, I'm a 10-10 baby. So the symbolic overlays of these pieces are significant. But when they rolled me in there, I literally experienced the overlay of the matrix system, where it was the Milgram experience, I believe it's called. No, Milgram experience is an experiment to look up, but the Stanford University experiment was actually where they had done an experiment where they had volunteers sign up for an experiment of either being a patient, of either being a prisoner or guards. and then you take on the roles. And then they literally had to prematurely stop the experiment because the guards became too vicious and in fulfilling their orders, that they actually had to prematurely pull the plug on the experiment. And the man that was behind it, he wouldn't pull the plug, but his girlfriend, I heard, was the one that actually made them stop the experiment because people were going to be hurt. But I share that because when they rolled me into the second place, I literally experienced the matrix overlay, and I was interviewing to be a corrections officer at the time. Like I had already, I passed the test, and I've been an assistant probation and parole officer before for a summer after university. So I knew what a prison was like because I'd done tours of the big penitentiaries and things as a professional. And so when I was rolled in there, I experienced the overlay where the patients were actually the guards. And then the professionals were the prisoners that had overtaken the guard's nest or the nurse station. And then they, in order to keep their role, they had to keep the prisoners locked up and in line. And what was maddening for me and why it was so eye-opening was because they literally avoided eye contact with people desperate for it. I asked for my lip balm 3 times, and each time I was told, I'm doing something more important than your request. I'll get to it if I have a chance later. The first time I thought, that's an interesting way to respond. The second time, that's a strategic way to respond. And then when my mother came in, I said, can you please ask for my lip balm, because they're more likely to give it to an outsider to show that they're treating us well. And when she asked and got the same response, her hands went up, and I'm so sorry. And of course you're doing something more important than lip balm. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. And it was like, oh, that's a different response than I give. And so all of it was so fascinating. That truly, when you have eyes to see the lies, particularly with the amount of training that I've had in sales, marketing, communication, leadership, coaching, to go in with eyes wide open and not on anything for, like, I hadn't even smoked weed in a month. So my system was clear, which meant I was fully connected. Which meant I was a total threat. And when I was fully connected, Lauren, literally before all of this, I felt, it was like I saw the game board of life, and then it was like I saw my light, my beacon come online, and the controllers or whoever it is were like, holy shit, what just happened? Who just came online? I literally was tuned in to the level where that experience was legitimately, oh, okay, that's how that goes. And when you talk about the matrix, at that time too, the fight between the fearful and the faithful, and the faithfully fearful and the fearfully faithful, was so prevalent in me. I was literally seeing it on the outside. And whether it was all in my head, or whether it was being fully tuned in, or whether it was a combination of both, who knows? But I told the story of maybe that could be beneficial for someone listening if you've ever heard it, which is basically that there was this farmer who had a herd of mares that he would let roam free in the day, and then they'd come back to the barn at night. And one day when they came back, they brought the most magnificent stallion that anyone had ever seen. And so he corralled the horses, and then he now had a precious prize. And so all the locals came and said, oh, you're so lucky. That's amazing.
I love this Asian, I love this proverb. Oh, yes, I love it so much. Sorry. Yes, keep going.
So the farmer said maybe. And then his son happened to be the best stallion trainer in the country. And so as he was trying to break the stallion, it ended up that the stallion threw him off and shattered his leg into several pieces. And so then all the farm locals came and said, oh, like, first we thought it was amazing luck, and now your son is injured and won't be able to walk for like a year, and it's terrible. And the farmer says, maybe. Well, there was a war happening in that country, and when the soldiers came the next day, his son wasn't able to go, and all of their sons were rounded up and taken to war, never to be returned again. And all the farm people said, at first we thought it was horrible, or first we thought it was great, and then we thought it was terrible. And now all of our sons we might never see again, and you've got your son here. You're so lucky. And he said, maybe.
I just love
So,
it. It
yeah.
like, yeah, it's one of my favorite ones. And you can keep going with this story. That's the thing. This is humans. You wait for the next thing to tell you your answer. Oh, you're so lucky, or oh, things are terrible. And it's like, if we were all just the farmer, just doing our own little thing like that, you know, is helping, it can help collectively as well. It doesn't mean just sowing your own farm. It's like, but not getting drawn too far into the chaos, not getting too drawn like into all of these successes. It doesn't mean not acknowledging your excesses and not acknowledging your chaos, but it's like, in a moment anything can change, and it can be your side of the fence that you see it from that's like, is it luck or is it unlucky? And this is where perspective and having witness, or witness mentality, or witness awareness, or if you want to call it observation, where it's, you know, you can step back and assess the scene, which, you know, I think is so cool with your background, that you were able to experience all roles in the roles that you've done. Like, it wasn't just the prison guard. It's like, you've been the patient, you've been the observer, you've been the mother, you've been the child. But to have the ability to observe that and dictate that to humans is like amazing, because how many prison guards wouldn't even know that they're in prison, you know?
Well, that was the thing. And literally, because I'd been told about the story of King David right before all of this went down, and how King David was supposed, I'm not biblically based at all.
Yeah.
But now I'm starting to understand that Bible stands for basic instructions before leaving earth. And
oh my God. That's so cool.
And laws actually stand for the 4 jurisdictions, the first 3 of which are used within the court systems. So you have to understand land, air, water, and the 4th being space, of which we are. And if you look at the CIA Gateway Process report, you will actually understand that we are the center point, which is the white and black hole, which is where willpower and awareness actually meet in the heart, which magnifies and amplifies. So when we actually are able to understand that, then you start to read the Bible in a different way, which I haven't done, to be fair, but I have started to understand how we can pull from it to be able to glean the stories that we need to use. And so King David was a story that had been shared beforehand, where he was God's favorite son, and he was supposed to be gone away to war, but he somehow wound up at home, and he saw the most beautiful woman sunning on a roof nearby. And so he found out who her husband was and had him sent to the front lines to be killed. And then he took her into his harem to be his. And so that created disfavor with God. But that story was told to me days before I called myself in, when the madness of my awakening was unfolding. And I share it because I used that as the king, pawn, bishop example as to how I was going to play in the game. I didn't remember, ironically, about the castle or the queen.
My 2 favorite pieces. And they're powerful. Too. Yeah.
Very.
That's awesome.
Very. Right? I literally only was playing with those 3. And what was so fascinating was, because of that, I understood that if I was to be the pawn, I would go where they told me to go. And at one point in the second place, which was literally the science experiment, they came in and kind of we had a conversation where it seemed like I was in trouble. And when they left, they closed my door. And it looked like I was trapped, which was looking to see how I would respond. And I went over to the door and I pulled it open just enough for them to understand. I knew I wasn't trapped, but I wasn't going to fight them. And so I would literally I played the game like a bishop, which meant I literally stood at the edge of my cell, and I raised my hand and I peered into the eagle's nest. And can you imagine having 5 guards, which were nurses and doctors and security, in the room opposite me with the plexiglass window, which is called the eagle's nest in prison centers. But in the eagle's nest, all these professionals are standing there, and I'm raising my hand and looking to make eye contact for nearly a minute. They all just tried to stay looking down, wouldn't look. And it was so fascinating because finally they did. And my nurse was getting really irritated because I was a demanding one, because I wanted to know the rules of the game. Because if like the Socratic method is exactly how we win this war. Because if we can actually understand how to ask questions,
Yes.
as you know, as a coach, questions are where we are most powerful. And yet, when we are able to answer questions with questions in the legal system, for instance, that is when we stay in the power position. But in that experience, there was literally a point where I went over to the nurses' station, and I wanted to, whatever I asked for, one of the guards literally said "fuck," because he was so frustrated because he knew that he wasn't going to get one over on me.
Yep.
And literally you could make a phone call in that place every 2 hours, but they took my phone. So how many people actually know phone numbers nowadays? Which is, I feel, how it translates to what's going on right now, and how they are making it so that we're also technologically dependent for then when technology goes away. Like, I can't get phone calls to my phone that, like, when I answer, I get nothing. I have to call the number back now because of all of the activism that I'm involved in. So it's like, and we could, like, but right before we got on here, you had sent me the Zoom link to my Facebook, and it was removed. It wouldn't show up on my computer, and it was removed from my phone before I was able to send it to myself. So you had to do it for me. So it's like, when you are willing to speak out and say truth in this world, it's a dangerous thing until we actually take the power back by remembering the power is within. And that is why we've got to know who our people are. We've got to, like, with the Peaceful Inner Warriors United movement, I've been working to find the people that are advocating for themselves and for others to be able to take a stand and do what we're required to do here at this time in humanity's history. Our story is to know how do we keep ourselves safe when the power grids go down, because it's going to happen in the not too distant future. And when everybody's been so trained to be reliant on technological devices that they have no self-care strategies, mental health, suicide rates going to have a huge spike, which is maybe the reason that this conversation revolved around this. Because as much as I do oftentimes go into this specifically, it's not necessarily where I generally like to stay, because of the stigma around it, because of how uncomfortable it is, but also because it is at a higher level. And most people aren't comfortable at that higher level. And so there's the part of me that's like, if we can just help take people out of their comfort zone to a level where it's like, okay, it's uncomfortable, but it's being told in a safe way, which I wasn't able to do before, but not being able to do it helps me now do it. Then we can really empower people to understand that if we can create a special practice that honors all of who and whose we are, regardless of the box that we've put God into, what I oftentimes say is that God is dog backwards.
Exactly.
And what happens when you back a dog into a corner?
It's going to lash out.
Exactly. So we don't need to be the dogs. If we can just band together and become the ripple effect that put our people that can't protect themselves, like the young ones that are being preyed upon right now, into the center, and the elders, if they haven't already been taken out or contaminated with what's going on, it's like we put them in the center and protect them, and then we warriors are the ones that radiate out, and that's how we change this world.
Babe, are you a part of my I was just laughing before because I'm like, you literally just titled what my private group is all about, and it's like learning how to master the first step of taking uncomfortable action, because you've got a beautiful essence. When I look at you, you're divinely feminine, but it's like there's that side of also being able to step into allowing people. How I describe it is I love to allow people to feel comfortable to get uncomfortable. And so it's like learning how to master that first step of taking uncomfortable action. So if you're not a part of it, I would love you to be active in there and to put your message out in there as well, wherever. Like, I don't know if that resonates with you being on technology, but if it does, join in there, and we'll have, once I stop the recording, we'll have a bit more of a chat of the other mental health system side of things too. But I feel like the calls that I've had today have just been really, really next level deep, like that. I'm just like, oh my God, I feel like there's going to be something moving forward with you and the other lady that I spoke to, and that hasn't really happened as of yet. So that's really cool.
Sweet. Yeah, sure.
Wicked. Yeah, because like I'm all about people being passionate of what they want to share, and like that aligns with me of like, yeah, sometimes things are going to be said in a way like, yeah, bring up the word suicide, and some people are like, oh, you can't talk about that. It's like, well, I can, because it's a thing, and so is death, and so is birth, and so is all of the other uncomfortable topics of trauma and abuse and all of that. And it's not about doing it in a way of unnecessary exposure, which is something that I learned in the paramedic world. There is a gracefulness about what you can share in a way that adds value, but it's not exposing you to a suicide if that's not appropriate for you. It's not exposing you to a dead body unless there's a message behind why I'm getting you to, like, why I'm wanting you to see that, or why you're there for that particular job. It's like, you and I are not putting out information that's like, oh, we just thought we'd share it, ego boost, or I'm so knowledgeable. It's like, no, this is to spread the sprinkles of magic and light onto these areas that aren't being spoken about, that people are not feeling safe in these areas to talk about. It's like, hey, like, it's out there. Why don't we put it out there and give you a framework or a system or a group that you can be a part of to voice your concerns, questions, or just join in, knowing that there are other people out there like you and I that we want to chat, we want to connect. So I appreciate you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you for reaching out and for having me on today, and for facilitating what unfolded, because it definitely was an organic unfoldment. So would love to know if anybody does have any insights, to leave a comment on the video and give it a thumbs up so that it helps with algorithms, because ultimately in this crazy world, it really helps.
100%. So I'm going to include all of Laura's, the ways that you can contact her, see what content she's putting out there. But before we actually wrap up, what is a book or a podcast or a song or something that you would like 100% recommend to our viewers or listeners, that is like your, it can be something that you're currently reading or listening to, or just something that lights you up and go like, oh yes, I want everyone to hear this.
The first thing that came to mind, in truth, is the book that I will be writing, which will be called Fully Committed. And it's about the sacred sojourn of the soul, which has been truly transformational for me. A playlist that is stuff that I've been part of that have really opened my eyes and added a tremendous amount of value on my YouTube channel, which is under Laura J.E. Hamilton as well, is the Michael and Laura Show, which is an introduction to the teachings of the Ascended Masters, which I started because I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
And I was poured into to a level where it was just like so many other people would benefit from having access to this information, that I didn't want to be the reservoir and instead be the river, like what John Maxwell shares. And then the book that came to mind that I think could be beneficial, that I haven't read in quite some time, but was really useful, was by Matt Kahn. And I think it's Everything is Here to Help You. I have it over on my bookshelf,
Cool.
but that was the book that came to mind. And The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz is a go-to for anybody that is looking for something short, sweet, simple. And the book that is on the couch right here is Carolyn Mace's book, Sacred, which
nice
goes
one.
really deep into the four survival archetypes of the victim, child, saboteur, and prostitute. And it's basically about understanding whether you're in the scared side of the disempowered aspect of that pattern, or the sacred side, which is very much what is missing in this world. And it's a matter of where we put our creativity as to whether we're scared or whether we're in the sacred.
Wow, awesome. I've got those details written down, but so they can find you on YouTube. But how I discovered Laura was through Facebook at Laura J.E. Hamilton, and the same on Instagram. But just check out the show notes, give it a click, give her a follow, say hey, introduce yourself, tell her what you found interesting about this podcast. Tell me what you found interesting, like post it somewhere, share it on your story. That's like, I get so interested in the ways that, all of these stories are going to be hitting a variety of different audience members, different viewers and listeners at different times. And that's something that really excites me, of like, your message is going to reach somebody at that divine moment that they needed to hear this. So, if that person is you, please give us a message, either one of us, and just say, hey, like, I listened to this episode and this is where I'm at, because this is the work that we're both in, really. So it's all about connection. It's all about getting you to, step out of your comfort zone and speak up, speak your truth, which, is a big one.
Huge. And actually, I will also mention, if you don't mind, that I have actually been part of putting together a conscious music project that it's been designed to basically uplift and inspire the artists and create a circle of cross promotion and cross pollinating. So on my YouTube channel, I'm interviewing each of the artists, and we've got 22 artists, because I wanted 22 songs for the High Rise of Emotional Awareness teaching that I've got. Wow. Which is based on Abraham Hicks's emotional guidance system.
That's come up twice. That's come up with the last lady as well. Abraham Hicks is and that's everything that we're doing at home here too. And I've just put together an album of songs that I've written for people, of them telling their inspiring stories. So this is just like, I know I was meant to connect with you. This is crazy, but not crazy.
Crazy good.
I'm going to have to check out your channel.
Yeah. So album 22, we haven't fully released it yet. There is a page, but I just want to get it fine-tuned before it's made available. But truly, it's amazing artists, and it's all even tuned to like 432 hertz instead of 440, which is healing compared to destructive. And so when we actually take back the music and the creativity and the artistry and get back to being what it means to be human with an extra E, for all the hues included, and for where we place our energy as a collective, that's what I'm all about.
Babe, I'm just loving it. I am so grateful for you. I'm really grateful for your time, energy, and I know that I'm not the only one that this is going to add value to. So we might even do what I'm aiming to do actually with this podcast, is to get a revisit of everybody who's been on here already to come back again. And doesn't matter, that could be a week later, it could be a couple of months, could be a year later, whatever. But just to check in with where you're at with your project, your book, because I want to be able to promote that for you as well, and spread as much light for you and your world as we can, because this sort of stuff is like, it's the big stuff. It's the it's the stuff that's needed.
Fully agree. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to stop the recording and just stay on for a little bit, girly.
Look forward to it. Thanks.